Hello, this is Semi-Intelligent. I'm relatively new to YouTube, and I thought I would start with something that I've been reading, a bit of philosophy, that has taken my interest so far, and that is the Tao Te Ching. Currently, I'm reading this version of it. You can find it at Barnes& and Noble. And let's start. I'm going to start by reading the first lesson, or the first chapter of it, and then I'm going to go over my views and opinions of what it is. Now, the first one, the Tao that can be followed is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth, while naming is the origin of myriad things. Therefore, always desireless, you see the mystery. Ever desiring, you see the manifestations. These two are the same. When they appear, they are named differently. This sameness is the mystery. Mystery within mystery, the door to all marvels. Now, the first part of it, I think, speaks to a very fundamental part of the Tao Te Ching. And one of the reasons that the Tao Te Ching can be used in conjunction with many different religions and many different other philosophies. The Tao that can be followed is not the eternal Tao. Now, for this concept, we must understand that each individual person is themselves a miracle. With nearly 6 trillion people on the planet, for one person to be born, two people out of 6 trillion have to meet. And then beyond that, they have to fall in love and have a child. Now, if you really think about that, that's only a 1 in 3 trillion chance that anybody's even born. And that's not counting the other things that make us who we are. Sure, there's genetics, which is going to give you an idea about someone's capabilities or a baseline of someone's capabilities. Maybe this person was born with the genetics that makes them super smart or makes them super athletic. Um, that doesn't describe the entirety of the person, because each individual day or each individual second, we all experience new things. And these new things form the basis of our thoughts, which is really the basis of our actions. And therefore, each genetic part of your body in part determines which path you're going to follow. But beyond that, after you're born, each interaction that you have will undoubtedly alter the way you think. And when it alters the way you think, it changes the path that you're going to follow. And nobody is going to have the exact set of genetics or the same set of experiences that form the basis of their thinking or the way that they experience or travel through life. So no one path or no one way that any one person um, goes or thinks is eternal. It's all subjective to that person. The path that I follow is not going to be the path that anybody else follows. Now, sure, there are certain things that we can teach each other, certain shared experiences. We are all human. So we are going to experience things like loss, the death of a loved one, the death of a friend, the death of pets. We're going to experience the joys of meeting someone new, of falling in love, the sorrow of falling out of love. We all experience these things. And we can share our experiences with each other. these small parts of the path that we follow throughout our entire lives. But as each one of us is different and each one of us experiences different things, our individual path is going to be different. Now, when it speaks of the eternal Tao, this is not the path that I follow. This is not the path that anyone else follows. But this is a combination of all paths. The best way I can describe this is one day, I currently work at a factory. And one day at the factory, I was moving a pallet of cups from my line that I work on to the wrapper, who wraps it with plastic to ship it out of the factory. And I noticed that as I moved through and not really thinking about it, I would stop and let other pallet jacks move through or the forklift move through. But each and every one of us, though we were following our own specific tasks that we had to do, were moving in conjunction with each other. It's much like a choreographed dance, what you would see in some movies that showed great galas and great balls that were put on by feudal kings and feudal lords, where each participant in the dance was moving in a very set, very specific way, which was the fashion at the time. And each one individually had a path that they would follow, but that path corresponded with the other paths that everybody else was following, and it created a very ordered set of movements. Now, this was happening in the factory because, well, we were all working together and we were all doing our jobs. But if you go outside of the factory and you say, look at the town or the city that the factory is in, and you see certain stores open up at certain times, businesses open up at different times. Because they open up at different times, people have to get there at different times. And in a way, the same kind of dance that you see at a factory with the different employees moving in specific ways, all moving in different ways, but all moving in conjunction with each other to perform specific tasks. You see the same thing naturally happening with cities, because stores open up at certain times, the traffic flows certain ways down certain streets, again at certain times, and other ways at other times. And it's a very, if you look at it, it can be a very choreographed kind of dance, even though each individual is following their own path and for their own reasons. But when they combine together in that city, it is a very ordered and organized, choreographed sort of dance. Now you back up further and you go to a state level. Now, of course, you don't necessarily have people traveling from the middle of one state to the middle of another state to go to a job or something along those lines, but you still have this interaction between one state and another state, orderly travel, shipment of goods, people going out on vacation, visiting friends and family, and again, it can look like a very choreographed dance. So, even though each individual person has a path that they'll follow, and none of these paths may be the same, they all work together for a larger order or a larger choreographed dance or path, as you would say, or as it would say. And that's what the Tao is talking about. The Tao that can be followed by any individual is specific to that individual and not eternal. But the path that nature, the universe, that it follows is. And it's not, or it doesn't really exist without these smaller paths that also move. And that's where you get that the Tao, or the way that can be followed, is not the eternal way. The eternal way is nature, how it flows. The path that can be followed, or the way that can be followed, is your individual path and where you go. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Now, this is, again, in a similar note, is a concept of mortality over eternity. And what I take from this is to mean that every generation we seem to come up with new names for essentially the same eternal concepts. A good example, if you look at modern culture, we hang out or we hook up when two people get together to go on a date. A culture, maybe a generation ago, it wasn't hanging out or hooking up, it was going on a date. A generation before that, an engagement may have been used as a terminology. Our terminology for the same concepts changes and evolves as we go along. The concepts themselves don't really change all that much. This is why in school we're taught things like the Iliad or the Odyssey, stories that are thousands of years old. The names for the things in these stories have changed over time, but the concepts behind these names have not. A good example is in Romeo and Juliet. The concept behind Romeo and Juliet, the two people falling in love and fighting for that love, regardless of the challenges that presented themselves. This idea or this concept holds true today, as true as it did when Shakespeare wrote the story. Now, some of the concepts or some of the names have changed since then. An example is the scene where one of Romeo's friends bites his thumb at, I think it was the Prince of Cats. And the Prince of Cats takes a great offense at this. "Are you biting your thumb at me?" To us, this, to a student who's reading it now, may not necessarily catch on to what this is talking about. It's a lot like if one gang member flipped off another gang member. The same offense is carried through, the same concept is coming through. One person is insulting another through a gesture, but the gesture has changed. The language at which that insult is carried through has changed. So here we get the idea that the name changes over time. The concept doesn't. The concepts that we're dealing with today, the struggles, the issues, and the things that we visit on a daily basis are the same things we've been visiting for thousands of years. We just have new names for them. And yes, I know there are some people who will say, "But my cell phone is broken, and this wouldn't have happened 100 years ago." That's true. The technology is more advanced now than it has been in the past. But if you really look behind and ask what that technology does, the concept of, without my cell phone, I can't contact someone. 1,000 years ago, yeah, it wouldn't have been a cell phone, but could you have gotten a letter through to the same person? Could you speak with the same person if they're not in the same town? Probably not. The concept there is the same, just the language is different. That's where we get the name that can be named as not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. This really gets to a question that I've had, or that I've asked myself at some point, and that is, which came first, the language or the concept? Now, to really explore that question is what this first lesson is talking about. We must understand what the difference is between language and concept. A concept is a thing, really. A very good idea. It's either an idea or an object that hasn't quite been named yet, or else we would call it by a specific name. A great example of this would be, or an example of this I can use is like this. It's a cup. We know it's a cup. We know that the word for it is cup. But if we take a moment and we try to put ourselves in a different mind frame, let's say we're a 1-year-old child, someone who's yet to experience or yet to learn what a cup is. Then what do we say this is? It's an object. We know it's an object. We can pick it up. We can feel it. We can look at it. We know what it does. It can carry liquids in it. It can carry other things in it. It can be turned over and spilt. At that point, it's a concept. And there's still a great deal of mystery with it because we can know what it does, but without that language, we don't know what it necessarily is. Now, when we learn the language, when we learn that this is a cup, we've defined it. So that's really where we get that the concept is eternal, but the name is not. There are things in the universe that exist that we don't have names for. They were always there. They have always been there, and they'll always be the same, within certain reason. Scientists do believe that there will be a time when the universe will no longer exist, and we do understand that there was a time where the universe didn't exist, kind of, but that's for another video. But the concept of an object exists, or the concept exists regardless of if we have a word for it or not. It can be an eternal in that way until we have a name for it. Once we have a name for it, then the concept is less this ethereal thing and more of an idea. Now the next part, we get to, now the nameless of the origin of heaven and earth is simply that everything exists because at one point we had a concept for it. Then we decided to make it and name it, and it is what it is now. While naming is the origin of myriad things. Now, when we have a concept, concepts can be very fluid. They can change, they can evolve. But really, when then the concept evolves or changes, it's now a different concept. It's not the same as what it was. When you start beginning to name things, like, again, that glass cup I was holding up. When we name it as a cup, we can now begin to see what it does. We can begin to, in fact, alter what it can do by saying that this is a cup. No, it's a coffee cup. So it holds coffee, not regular drinks. In naming it, we have a more of a solid way of changing what something is or defining what it is. Whereas when we don't have a name and we just have a concept, it's much harder to alter it without making it something different entirely. Get back to where I was. Alright, therefore, always desireless, you see the mystery. Ever desiring, you see the manifestation. Now, what this is talking about, I believe, is more to do with our focus. If we don't desire anything, then we can look at things in a much more neutral way and understand more about it. Or not necessarily understand more about it, but wonder more about it. Think, make concepts about it, and really see the beauty of what something is without trying to force ourselves to really name it, to really make that concept a solid thing. When we desire something, we attach certain values to it. We attach names to it. We make this thing less of an object of mystery and more of an object that we want to acquire. These two are the same. Really, it is the same. Because regardless of whether we desire something, someone else is going to desire. I guess an example of that is like I play a lot of video games, and I personally prefer playing video games on consoles over computers, and I personally prefer the PlayStation brand over Xbox. Now, because of that, I have my reasons for both of those. Because of that, a PlayStation or PlayStation game has become an object of desire for me. Whereas something for Xbox, not really. Never really liked the Xbox. And because of this, I know more specific details or specific facts about the PlayStation brands, and don't know as much about the Xbox. The Xbox is more of a nebulous concept to me, I guess you can say. Whereas the PlayStation, which is something I desire, is something solid to me. I have friends at work who are pretty much the exact opposite. They swear by the Xbox. That is their thing of desire. They know everything that it can do. But they don't know anything about the PlayStation. It's more of a mystery to them. And that simply goes down to this can be tied right back to that first concept about the Tao that can be, almost forgot where I said, or the first part of it. The Tao that can be followed is not the eternal Tao. The path of the person, or the path of me, is around the PlayStation. I like the PlayStation. Whereas for my friend, his is the Xbox. The Xbox is his way. This is the way he plays games, and not the PlayStation. The concept is there in both instances. It's different in both instances, though. He has essentially named and made his desire the Xbox, and to him the PlayStation is a mystery. To me, the PlayStation is my desire, is the thing I've named, and the Xbox is the mystery. To someone who doesn't play video games at all, both of them are mysteries. So all of these, both a thing being named or desired, being well studied and not well studied, or a mystery, all exist in the same thing, or all are the same thing in the universe when you step back away from the individual path and onto looking at what the universe or what nature has. Just because I have a specific name for something or I have a specific desire for something doesn't mean that someone else is. or does. In this way, something can be both named and nameless. The sameness, or when they appear, they are named differently. Again, the whole idea is just because I have a name for something doesn't mean that everybody else does. Just because I have a desire for something doesn't mean everybody else does. If we understand that, we'll have a better understanding of who each and every one of us is, or rather have a better way of relating to each other, because we can see the same things in our own path that we see in other people's paths. It's just that they're the same concepts or the same ideas, just not the exact same thing. This sameness is the mystery. If we only understand things from our point of view, and we try to only relate to the universe in our point of view, we're not going to understand things. We'll understand how we're going and what we're doing, but we won't understand where other people are coming from. Not necessarily. Mystery within mystery. It's just hard to understand other people because they're following a different path than us. And this is something that really, for us to work together, we need to understand that not all of us are going to be the same. And once we start understanding this, or start letting go and letting things just progress, we'll be much happier people. This will open up, this understanding can open up new doors for all of us. And that's the first lesson, or at least my understanding of the first lesson. Anyone have a different opinion, just leave me some comments. I'll be glad to hear them. And I'll end this using, this is it's been used as a greeting and a parting for hundreds of years by pagans a lot, or mainly. And that is just to say, merry meet.